I love the Xenoblade Chronicles series, so I'm hoping that the imminent release of Xenoblade Chronicles 3 will get people interested in checking out the series for the first time. For those people, I thought I'd offer a straightforward guide to the games in the series in the order in which they are best played. If you want the quickest possible answer to this question without having to sit through a whole video, then here it is. You can probably pick up and enjoy any of the 3 main Xenoblade games without much of a fuss. So if you're particularly excited by one of the games more than the others, then go ahead and dive into that one. But the ideal play order is to start with the original game, Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition, followed by Xenoblade Chronicles 2, and then Xenoblade Chronicles 3, all on the Nintendo Switch. I know, 1, 2, 3, I'm blowing your mind here. If that's all you wanted from this video, then be gone with you, you have what you need. But if you'd like to hear a little bit more context, justification, and elaboration, as well as some info about the side games, then keep watching. Here is the agenda for this video. We're going to talk about what the Xenoblade Chronicles series is, we're going to specify a few games that I am not talking about during this video, we're going to list the games that I am talking about during this video, including main games and side games, then we're going to talk about where those side games fit in alongside the main games, and finally, we're going to talk about the order in which you should play the main games, specifically by answering these 2 questions. Should you play Xenoblade Chronicles 1 before 2 or vice versa? And can you jump into Xenoblade Chronicles 3 without playing any prior game? And then we'll be done, so we can wrap things up and I'll send you on your way. Xenoblade Chronicles, also known as just Xenoblade, is a series of Japanese action role-playing games created by Tetsuya Takahashi and developed by Monolith Soft. These games are known for their memorable and complex characters, dynamic and twisty plots, deep and engaging combat systems, and their gorgeous, expansive, open environments. In Japan, the series is simply known as Xenoblade, and in the West, it's known as Xenoblade Chronicles. So, for instance, you might hear one person say Xenoblade 3, you might hear someone else say Xenoblade Chronicles 3. These are the same game. The titles are interchangeable. Sometimes I will just drop the word Chronicles because it's a little bit of a mouthful. So how many games are there in the series? Well, let's start by specifically ruling out the games I'm not talking about. Firstly, I'm going to set aside Xenoblade Chronicles X. Sorry X, you're a great game, but nobody has a Wii U, and you're not connected to the storyline of any other currently released Xenoblade game anyway. I do hope that Xenoblade X will someday see release on a system that people own, but for now, let's just set it aside. I'm also going to set aside Xenogears and Xenosaga, 2 previous game franchises created by the same creator, Tetsuya Takahashi. Some fans will talk about Xeno like it's all one big series, and there are references, but there's no canonical connection, and I don't think even the most die-hard Xeno fan would tell you that you need to play them before touching Xenoblade. So what does that leave us with? There are 3 main Xenoblade games that we're talking about, and they are all available on Nintendo Switch. Xenoblade 1 was originally released for the Wii, but it's been remastered for Switch under the title of Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition. Xenoblade 2, also on Switch, and Xenoblade 3 coming to Switch this month, July 2022. In addition to the 3 main games, each of the 3 has some kind of expansion or side game, which are as follows. Future Connected, the Xenoblade 1 Epilogue campaign, which is included in the Switch version, not available for any other version. Torna the Golden Country, which is a prequel campaign for Xenoblade Chronicles 2, which can be purchased either as a DLC expansion for 2, or purchased as a standalone title for Nintendo Switch. And then finally, Xenoblade Chronicles 3 has DLC story content in the works, which we currently know nothing about. For all these side games, all that you really need to know is just play them after their respective main game. But if you want more information, then here's more information. Regarding Xenoblade 1, when you buy Definitive Edition, you'll have Future Connected already unlocked and it will be possible for you to jump right in without touching the main story, but you should not do that. Future Connected is an epilogue story set after the main Xenoblade 1 game, so play the main game first. Future Connected has no connection to Xenoblade 2, and it seems like it might have some foreshadowing connected to Xenoblade 3, but I don't know that for sure because I haven't played Xenoblade 3 yet. Regarding Xenoblade 2 and Torna. Torna is a prequel to Xenoblade 2, but that doesn't mean you should play Torna first. Torna's storyline kind of assumes you're already familiar with world-building concepts included in the main game, so you might have a hard time following Torna's story if you're not all that familiar with the main game. Plus, Torna will spoil a bunch of revelations that come in the mid-game of Xenoblade 2. If you Google around, you will see people who suggest you should play the main game all the way up through the end of Chapter 7 and then stop and play Torna all the way through and then return to the base game and finish it off, but no, don't do that, that's silly. Play Torna after the main game of Xenoblade 2. Torna has no connection to Xenoblade 1, and I'd be very surprised if it has any connection to 3, so you don't need to worry about when you play Torna in relation to those games. And as for Xenoblade 3 and its story DLC, well, I don't know yet, because as of this recording, we know literally nothing about that expansion, but it's coming out long after the base game, so it's probably best played after the base game. So to sum up, as I said before, play any given side game at any point after you play the corresponding main game. And now on to the main issue. We've cleared the table, we've listed the games, we've talked about the side games, so finally let's talk about in what order should you play Xenoblade Chronicles 1, 2, and 3. And as promised, I'm going to talk about that question by breaking it down into two separate questions. First, does it matter in what order you play 1 and 2? And second, can you jump into 3 without having played any previous game? Okay, so 1 or 2 first. I'm going to answer this question without spoiling either game in any major way, but there is one slightly spoilerish thing I absolutely have to tell you here in order to discuss this question. So here it is. Xenoblade Chronicles 1 and Xenoblade Chronicles 2 are related to one another. That's it, that's the spoiler. I know that doesn't sound like it should be a spoiler, but it kind of is because Xenoblade Chronicles 2 was, at the time, marketed and sold as a standalone story in a different world with different characters, kind of like Final Fantasy, where each numbered game is a whole new narrative universe that doesn't tie into the others in any kind of shared continuity. But even though the world and characters of Xenoblade 2 are different from the ones in Xenoblade 1, there are important narrative and continuity connections between the two. Without spoiling it, all I can really say is that when you get into the late game, deep lore parts of Xenoblade 2, you learn some things that connect to the late game, deep lore parts of Xenoblade 1. Although they are in separate worlds, there is an important backstory connection between those two worlds and how each one got to be the way it is. For Xenoblade 2 players at the time of release, I would have considered that a spoiler, since it's something you discover fairly late in that game. But the marketing of Xenoblade Chronicles 3 has been much more upfront about the fact that it shares storyline connections to both 1 and 2, so yeah, the cat is out of the bag. These games, despite taking place in different worlds, are narratively connected. So if they're connected, does that mean you have to play 1 before 2? Well, no, because 2 doesn't really follow on from the end of 1, it just connects to some of the same deep backstory lore that 1 connects to. There's almost no story content in Xenoblade 2 that assumes you are familiar with Xenoblade 1, aside from a few Easter eggs and some non-canon DLC stuff. So from a story perspective, in my opinion, it doesn't matter which game you play first. So the best way to choose between them would be to watch the trailers for each game and pick whichever one looks more appealing to you. In my case, that's Xenoblade 2, but your taste may vary from mine. However, that's just a story perspective. From a gameplay perspective, I'd actually give Xenoblade 1 a bit of a leg up in terms of how accessible it is to newcomers. Both games have deep and complicated battle systems, but Xenoblade 2 is more complicated and is also notoriously bad at teaching you how to play it. If you're intimidated by complicated real-time action RPG combat, then you might find Xenoblade 2's system a little easier to get into once you're already familiar with some of the fundamentals that carry over from Xenoblade 1. But if you're comfortable with diving into a complicated combat system that you will probably need online guides to fully understand, then go ahead, just jump into Xenoblade 2 if you want to. There are actually a lot of guides out there on the internet for just that reason. So to sum up, either Xenoblade 1 or 2 is, in my opinion, a fine place to start from a story perspective, but Xenoblade 1 is a bit more approachable from a gameplay perspective. So if you're concerned about gameplay approachability, Xenoblade 1 is a slightly better starting point. Now, the big question, can I just jump into Xenoblade Chronicles 3? Bear in mind that I haven't played it yet, but based on publicly available information, I'm going to give this one a yes, but something of a more heavily qualified yes. The marketing material for this game says that it's aimed at longtime fans as well as newcomers, but it sure seems like there are certain aspects of this game that will probably land better if you're familiar with 1 and 2. Xenoblade Chronicles 3 takes place in a new world, which seems to be the literal fusion of the worlds from Xenoblade 1 and 2, like literally the land masses from those worlds merged. The plot features protagonists who hail from 2 different nations at war with one another, and one of those nations has aesthetics, character designs, and even certain gameplay style details which associate with the world from Xenoblade 1, and the other is associated with stuff from Xenoblade 2. There are even some characters who appear in the Xenoblade Chronicles 3 trailer who seem to be connected to, or maybe even just straight up be characters from the first 2 games. I think that on the whole, the main plot of this game, the core conflicts between our protagonists and our antagonists, is probably going to be comprehensible to newcomers. But I have a feeling there's going to be more stuff in this game that will go right over new players' heads, and lots of stuff designed to make players think, oh yeah, like in Xenoblade 1, or hey, isn't that one guy from Xenoblade 2? Which might not be so fun for you if you're a newbie. So that's why I say you probably should play Xenoblade 3 after the first 2. But again, it's a matter of your own personal taste. If you think you'll be comfortable just kind of rolling with it when something confuses you, then I'm not going to scare you away. As far as gameplay approachability, it looks to me like Xenoblade 3 has the most complicated system out of any of the main games, but based on journalist previews, it also sounds like it has the best tutorials to teach you how to play, so on balance, I'd say that's a point in favor of approachability. So once again, watch the trailer for the game. If it grabs you and you're like, yes, that's the game I want to play, then bear in mind the things I've said, but go for it if you're really feeling it. I hope I've given you the info you need to make your own decision about the best order for you to play these games. To recap, I think numerical order, 1, 2, 3, is the best way to play the main games, with the side games being fine to play anytime after each respective main game. However, I've linked trailers for each of the 3 main games in the description of this video, and I recommend that you watch them. If one of the trailers jumps out at you and you say, that one looks cool, I want to play that one right now, then just go ahead and play that one. You'll probably be fine. You might get a little bit confused at points, but that's not so bad, and if you're willing to just roll with it, then this is a great series. These games are great, and they're well worth playing on their own or in any order.